to this week's episode of News for Normies. I am your host, Millennial Meditations, and I want to welcome you to MAGA Month. It is now July 5th, 2025. Hope you all had a great 4th of July yesterday. Make sure to go back to work Monday with both your eyes and all your fingers and toes. Got a fun video today, but before I get into that, hit the like button, share with your normie friends, subscribe, and let me know what you think. I was looking through my analytics on the channels recently, and on Rumble, I am at 49 subscribers. Once I get to 100, I can be enrolled in the Rumble Creator Program. Not entirely sure what that entails, but it sounds good to me, so help me get there and keep the good fight going. So with that, all the business out of the way, let's get into the news. Now, before I get into this first story, I need to swap hats here because right off the rip, we're talking conspiracy theories. So a new left-wing conspiracy theory is going viral, claiming that the Trump administration is throwing deportees out of airplanes over the ocean. This theory proliferated on TikTok by idiots showing various flight paths of airplanes over the ocean and claiming the planes are showing up to their destinations without any passengers. So of course, they couldn't have stopped somewhere else in the process and let people off and then flown to their final destination to pick other people up, as planes do. No, they're throwing them out over the ocean and without any care in the world. Yeah, because the Trump administration is going to be doing that. They're so bold that they would just throw people out of airplanes and not have a care for it. Okay, cool. Yeah, if you're on TikTok, I'm not on TikTok. I'm on enough social medias. Go follow them, by the way. They'll be down in the description below. But if you're on TikTok, I'm sure you've seen this, and it's just absolutely bizarre. All right, enough of that one. Back to this one. So, the University of Pennsylvania has announced that they are going to strip Leah Thomas, who was born William Thomas, and who is the first openly transgender athlete to win an NCAA championship. They're going to strip him of medals for the swimming competition, apologize to other athletes, return to biological norms, thus banning transgender women from competing in women's sports, and reinstate Division I swimming records and titles to the athletes who Thomas beat in the competitions. Now, while I think this is a good thing because men should not be competing in women's sports, men and women are intrinsically different. We were created that way. It's great news, but it's a little too late to the other athletes who were competing against Thomas because they lost out on a lot of college scholarships because of this competition. So if anybody needs to make an apology, it's Thomas for doing this. It's just, again, if you're an adult and you claim to be transgender and you want to change yourself, go for it. Just don't try to compete against women, because even then you still have an advantage. Whether it's swimming, boxing, MMA, we've seen it. We have enough evidence that men who transition into women still have an advantage. It just blows my mind that we even have to have this conversation. Now, sadly, 2 firefighters were killed and a third was wounded after a man named Wes Rowley intentionally set a brush fire up in Idaho and waited to ambush first responders when they got there. To me, right now, it is unclear why he did this, but thankfully, that was all that happened. It is sad that 2 firefighters lost their lives and a third was wounded, but it could have been a lot worse. The county sheriff, when this was all going on, gave an emergency press conference and said the following.
I'm hoping that somebody has a clear shot and is able to neutralize, because they are not, at this point in time, showing any evidence of wanting to surrender. So as soon as somebody has a clear shot, I encourage them to take that shot and neutralize the threat.
Now, in the end of all this, the shooter ultimately took himself out, which is also sad. But if you're trying to kill first responders, you're kind of a dirtbag in my viewpoint. And thankfully, he did this and saved taxpayers from having to keep him in jail, feed him, house him, and go through a trial. So, my heart goes out to the family of this young man. I don't know exactly why he did this, but if you are having thoughts like that or hurting yourself, go seek help. Call the suicide hotline, because you're just going to leave more of a devastating path behind you for everybody else to pick up. And more news out of Idaho. A man by the name of Brian Koberger, who was arrested for allegedly killing four college students up in Idaho, will avoid the death penalty because he pled guilty for the crimes. I didn't know that was the law in Idaho, that if you plead guilty to crimes like that, you avoid the death penalty. But I think he should still be executed because he killed four college students. Koberger was fired from his position as a university teaching assistant for stalking and harassing women, making creepy comments toward female students, and ultimately for just being a piss poor teacher's assistant. Now, what's kind of funny to me in this situation is that he could have gotten away with these murders, but he was caught on Reddit, of all places, for answering questions about the murders, and the internet sleuths started putting pieces together. So never underestimate the power of the internet, because they will find you. All right, next up. And y'all know I really don't like to talk about celebrity news, but I think this one is important. Sean Diddy Combs, was acquitted of human trafficking and racketeering charges, but was found guilty on 2 counts related to prostitution. Now, to me, this seems like a slap on the wrist for someone who's very likely a human monster, and in my opinion, let me take this hat back off real quick. Put this one back on real quick. He probably got off because if he would have been sentenced, in my opinion, or found guilty on the human trafficking and other charges, he probably would have squealed on other people who are very high up in the entertainment industry, probably even government. So, it would not shock me if there were some people pulling strings behind the scenes to get him off of this, because he knows a lot of people. He probably would have started dropping names. All right. Back to the other hat. Here we go. Oh, okay, cool. So a new report has now come out that details how entrenched the Obama administration and several of the intelligence agencies were in developing the Russia collusion hoax. James Comey, James Clapper, and John Brennan were 3 of the biggest figures in this Russia collusion hoax. I have a link to an article about this if you want to read more. The long and short of it is that they were basically looking into this and compiled a report in about 3 days, something that would have taken months, if not years, to do. It was a very sloppy job, and then the Obama administration just kind of okayed it. So these 3 men I just mentioned, and maybe even Barack Obama himself, should be investigated and thrown in prison for this, because it's not treasonous because they weren't doing it on behalf of another country, but it is very seditious because they were trying to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. And it's also weird that none of the corporate media outlets really talked about this. This is a really big deal because a presidential administration was trying to obstruct another one from possibly coming in. Now, we can look back on history and know Trump won the 2016 election, but still, this is outrageous, and it blows my mind why none of the corporate media are talking about it. Probably because they had a hand to play in it too, if I had to guess. So again, like I said, link down below. I've got multiple links for almost all these stories. But, you know, if you hate the corporate media, tune in every week because I try to do better than them. Now, to shine some good light on the intelligence agencies, the FBI arrested a man named Alejandro Theodoro Oreña, I think is how you pronounce that, don't care. They arrested this man for distributing face shields to rioters during the LA No Kings protest. So good on the FBI for cracking down on left-wing violence for once, instead of, you know, going after Catholic moms who don't want their elementary school kids to learn about, you know, gender transition and all that stuff. And this is another big story here. The DOJ has begun arresting people for defrauding Medicare. Over 300 people were arrested for their involvement in a $15 billion scheme, which is now the largest healthcare fraud scheme in the U.S. history. Now, a lot of these people also have ties to foreign countries, such as Russia, India, Kazakhstan, other countries, you know. So, again, link down below if you want to read more into this, and I highly encourage you to do so. And people on the left wonder why we want to, you know, kind of cut back on Medicare, because people are clearly defrauding the government, which means they're defrauding you and I out of our taxpayer money. So another pretty big one here, not necessarily that big, but kind of scary. DHS raided a home in Los Angeles in regards to an Iranian human trafficking ring. The house that they raided was suspected to be a safe house for smuggling Iranian nationals into the United States, which isn't great considering the recent events between us and Iran. In the end, 9 people were arrested, with 7 of them being on the FBI terror watch list. Yeah, that definitely makes me feel great. So good for them for cracking down on this, and hopefully they keep getting more bad people like this. All right. Pardon me. So this is an interesting one and should definitely make you think about the state of things in Democrat-run cities. A driver's educational school in New York has recently been busted for fast-tracking illegal aliens through their program, even if they couldn't drive. T&E Driving School skirted many laws to pass people who shouldn't have been passed in order for them to acquire driver's licenses, which would then allow people access to government programs, since they now have a state-issued ID, and cause insurance costs to increase since they literally don't know how to drive. I mean, that's an A plus B equals C situation. People can't pass, but they're passed, so they get put out on the road. They crash their cars probably multiple times. Then the insurance companies are like, oh, well, now it's going to cost more to insure you, and then they jack rates up on everybody to cover the cost of those who either don't have it or are horrible drivers. So, again, this is why I think almost all insurance is a scam, and on top of taxes is the biggest scam perpetuated on the American people for far too long. The only one that really makes sense to me is like property insurance, like on your home or business, you know, if you own the building that your business is in, because typically real estate increases in value over time. But for your car, like you buy a brand new car off the lot, it's got 5 miles on it, you buy it for $60,000, it's immediately worth like 40 as soon as you drive it off the lot, and it just depreciates in value over time. So what are we insuring? We're insuring a depreciating asset. Doesn't make a lot of sense. All right. So, more news about the DOJ. They are floating the idea of stripping citizenship from naturalized citizens for committing certain crimes, and specifically those who obtained their citizenship through fraud or misrepresentation. So I'm sure that there is a laundry list of people that they're going to go after. However, this may be targeted at the likes of Ilhan Omar or even Zohran Mamdani up in New York, because they both have some pretty big question marks about how they got their citizenship. Now, good news about this whole thing. The DOJ has already done this to one man from the UK, and this man from the UK was recently denaturalized after it was found out that he was distributing child pornography. So, if any of those left-wing conspiracy theories I was talking about right up the top are true, maybe we should take this guy over the Atlantic and about halfway to the UK, throw him out the back. Because you can't rehabilitate these kind of people. But, you know, I'm just a guy on the internet. I don't have any say in that kind of stuff. So Trump and Elon are feuding again, and a reporter recently asked him if Elon would be deported, you know, by stripping his citizenship, and this is what President Trump had to say about that.
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible?
All right, couldn't say it, you know, any better myself. I doubt that will happen, but it's kind of funny. And when President Trump gives an answer like that, it's because he hasn't really thought about the question, because he's probably got other shit to do. So, highly doubt it'll happen. Now, since I was talking about corporate media a few minutes ago, we're going to circle back to that one. Paramount has settled their lawsuit with President Trump over the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris for editing the interview to make her look better. If you don't know, President Trump sued Paramount, who owns the 60 Minutes program, and he originally sued for $10 million, but Paramount settled with him for $16 million, and that money will go towards paying for Trump's future presidential library. But they will not put out an apology for their misdeeds. So, if Donald Trump has any sense of humor, he should call this the Library of Fake News and catalog every single incident where corporate media blatantly lied about him or the accomplishments of his administration, both in his first term and now. Oh, pardon me, I feel like I got a sneeze coming on. All right. So, speaking of corporate media, CNN finally had to admit that President Trump is doing a great job so far in his second term. I found a segment for you here if you would like to watch. It's about 6 minutes long, so I encourage you to watch the whole thing because it is crazy that they're actually giving him any credit for anything. But if you don't want to watch the whole thing, fast forward about 6 minutes, and here you go.
The mission was carried out with stealth and with precision. There were no American casualties. And while Congress is divided after receiving briefings on the extent of the damage, I'm sure that we've derailed Iran's nuclear program, at least temporarily. And there's some valuable deterrent effect for America's adversaries who witnessed last week's exercise. Then, last Tuesday, President Trump left the White House en route to Europe. At the time, there was a question as to whether Israel and Iran would honor a ceasefire. That caused the president to offer the most unfiltered, non-controversial, direct words that I can recall anybody ever saying about the Middle East.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Cut to The Hague, where he arrived for NATO meetings and was able to wrangle an agreement from our allies to more than double their defense spending target from 2% of gross domestic product to 5% by 2035. Also, while at NATO, in a press availability, he did something rare for Trump and I found rewarding. He showed empathy. It came in an exchange with a Ukrainian journalist who said that her husband was a soldier. She asked whether the U.S. would supply her country with Patriot missiles.
now.
Are you
And,
living yourself now in Ukraine?
my husband is there.
Wow.
And
I can see you very, it's amazing.
and me with the kids. I'm in Warsaw actually because he wanted me to be.
Is your husband a soldier? No?
He's.
He's there now. They do want to have the anti-missile missiles, okay, as they call them, the Patriots. And we're going to see if we can make some available. I wish you a lot of luck. I mean, I can see it's very upsetting to you. So say hello to your husband, okay?
Also in that presser, he was more reflective and respectful than usual of our allies.
They want to protect their country, and they need the United States. And without the United States, it's not going to be the same. And I left here differently. I left here saying that these people really love their countries. It's not a ripoff, and we're here to help them protect their country.
Back at home, Trump claimed that he's reached a trade deal with China and soon expects the same with India. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told Bloomberg that the deal was signed earlier this week. China's Commerce Ministry said Friday the two sides had further confirmed the details of the framework. Of course, Trump's initial imposition of tariffs wreaked havoc on American markets back in the spring. But now the markets have rebounded and grown. The S&P 500, NASDAQ hit record highs just yesterday. And it's not just the stock market. Inflation, the great economic fear of recent times, seems to be tamed. The rate is now reported at 2.4%, down from a high of 7% just 4 years ago. Meanwhile, blue-collar workers have seen real wage growth of 1.7% in Trump's first 5 months. This is the largest such increase in nearly 3 generations. Notwithstanding its impact on our national debt, there's also hope among some that Trump's big, beautiful bill will give further financial relief to blue-collar workers, as well as create incentives to build more factories in the U.S. Some already see this happening. For instance, General Electric has just announced that it'll invest almost $500 million in moving production of washing machines from China to Kentucky. And then there's the border. Crossings have slowed to a trickle. According to CBP's May update, Southwest border encounters have fallen to about 282 a day, a drop of 93% from last year and the lowest since the early 1960s. Perhaps the loudest cheering for those border numbers is coming from America's Latino community, which might initially sound counterintuitive. On Thursday, Pew Research released an enormous data analysis of the 2024 election, which contained several surprises. High on that list, President Trump won a bigger percentage of the Latino vote than previously believed. Hillary Clinton had a 38% lead over Trump among Hispanics in 2016. Joe Biden beat Trump in this demo by 25 percentage points. Kamala Harris's margin among these same voters over Trump, just 3 points. Even more surprising, perhaps, Pew Research concludes that if everyone had voted in 2024, contrary to the widely held belief that higher turnout helps Democrats, Trump would still have won. The data show 44% of non-voters said that they would have gone for Trump compared to 40% of non-voters who would have gone for Harris. So if more had voted, his margin would have grown. Yesterday came a huge decision from the Supreme Court. The High Court declared that federal district judges exceeded their authority when issuing nationwide injunctions against Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship. This will, of course, strengthen executive power both for Trump and for his successors. And finally, a Democratic socialist just won the nomination for mayor of New York City. And perhaps you're wondering, well, how does that affect Trump? It gives him the perfect foil, someone to play off in future political battles. This morning's New York Post references campaign literature for Zohran Mamdani, which advocates for increased taxation for, quote, richer and whiter neighborhoods. Just imagine what Trump will do with that. Winning became a punchline that Trump's opponents used to lampoon him in his first administration. He was a political novice then, surrounded by a team with which he was unfamiliar, and he was probably as surprised as the rest of us were that he won the election. This time is different. This time he came with a plan and a cabinet with senior advisors comprised of loyalists all well known to the president. And recently he's exhibited a more layered approach to governing on both the domestic and international front, no longer solely guided by winning each day's news cycle. By any objective measure, President Trump has his opponents on the run.
So on top of the accomplishments mentioned there in that clip, Trump also stopped a decades-long war between the Congo and Rwanda, as well as keeping a major war from breaking out between India and Pakistan. So if anyone deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, it's President Trump, not Barack Obama for just getting elected, I guess. Anyway, kind of coming to an end here. I've been paying attention to the news about the one big beautiful bill all week and had to rewrite this little segment a couple different times. So, as I record this, July 5th, 2025, at 8:18 a.m., the one big beautiful bill was passed by the House of Representatives on Thursday, July 3rd. I think President Trump has already signed it, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure he will by Monday. Either way, just giving you a timestamp here. Because it was a huge omnibus bill, there were things in it that I like and things that I don't like. I'm sure that the tax breaks in the bill will help alleviate financial strains on the average person. And I think it's good that there are additional resources for border security. And it's good that a step was taken towards peeling back some of the control that the NFA has on gun owners, because the final version of the Hearing Protection Act brought the cost of the tax stamp down to $0. However, the Short Act was not in the final version of the bill, and the whole point of the Hearing Protection Act was to remove suppressors from NFA regulations, meaning no more lengthy background checks, submitting fingerprints, and waiting for permission from the government to buy a muffler for your gun. Also, the addition of more Border Patrol personnel could turn around to bite us in the ass the next time a Democrat gets in office, because we saw during the Biden administration that plenty of CBP officials were just letting people in the country. So you have more people and they're being told to not do their job, then they're not going to do their job. And so next time a Democrat comes in and they want to push illegal immigration again, you've just got more people to fast track illegal aliens into the country. And the Short Act not being in the final one also pisses me off because, again, the length of a barrel does not make a firearm more or less deadly. It really depends on the firearm. And if you have a firearm that is chambered in a rifle cartridge, then a shorter barrel actually makes it less effective because it's less accurate. But again, it's not up to the federal government to decide what is right for every single person in the country. Yeah, and if you've never bought a suppressor, you have to, before this, you had to pay an additional $200 to the government, submit fingerprints, and go through an even more lengthy background check than you would to buy the firearm it's going on. Doesn't make any sense. Also, to my knowledge, there was a provision slipped in that would severely hurt the gambling industry, and not just the huge casinos across the country. It would also affect your sports betting on your phone, your local fishing tournaments and shooting competitions, and more. So, again, good job, Republicans, for upholding the do-nothing stereotype. Appreciate that. Now, to throw shade back on Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries pulled another political stunt, and this time it wasn't a fire alarm, by reading the big, beautiful bill on the House floor for over 8 hours straight. And at one point, he got a little confused.
And I'm flummoxed. Maybe it's flummoxed. As I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, I always wanted to use that word. I can't spell it, but I know what it means. I'm confused by many of these statements. So
good for him for pulling this stunt, I suppose. But it's funny how the Democrats are against the filibuster when they're not in control, but overly use it when they don't have control. Kind of like how, when Democrats had control, Republicans had like over 60 votes to try to repeal Obamacare, and it never happened. But when the Republicans are back in control, they only did it like twice or something. So, again, most of these politicians are just complete full of shit. Now, some sad news for the firearms industry. Anderson Manufacturing, who was a firearms manufacturer in Hebron, Kentucky, is closing up after 70 years in business. The company Ruger has purchased the company and will utilize the manufacturing capabilities from Anderson to continue making firearms parts and accessories. So it sounds like the people that worked for Anderson will not be out of a job. They will just be working for Sturm Ruger now. So sad news. And I believe I read this correctly, that if you have an Anderson firearm and you have some sort of manufacturer defect, well, you're not going to be able to get that fixed now. So good luck, I suppose. And finally, ending on a funny note, a new detention facility for illegal aliens has opened in the Everglades that is being colloquially named Alligator Alcatraz. President Trump arrived there on Tuesday to see the opening of the facility, and by the end of the week, the first group of detainees has arrived. So hopefully this helps curb the illegal immigration problem we have in the United States, and good luck to anybody that tries to run, because you got to deal with alligators and pythons and other nasty reptiles that are there in the Everglades area of Florida. So, yeah, that's all I've got. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sitting through the lengthy clip from CNN. If you appreciate this work, hit that like button, subscribe, especially if you're watching on Rumble. Share with your friends, because there's a lot of average people out there who are checked out of the news. And I will see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you.